Bosses of Reddit, what's the craziest thing an employee has done while at work? Did you fire him, her? Hospital has a dog park kinda thing where people can go hang out with their dogs outside. This includes letting the dog poo so long as you pick it up. We ended up getting lots of really large poops out there that the owners weren't picking up. We post bigger pick up your crap posters and set up a camera. Come to find out it was a night shift nurse going out there and crapping in the dog park at night. They were fired in relatively short order. The frick is her motivation for doing that? Large corporation with lots of cubes fired one employee who had a really sweet office chair. After the employee was fired, he requested his office chair back. After proving it was bought by fired employee and not company, HR went back to get it a week later for the fired employee. Sweet office chair was missing. HR does an investigation and finds a manager in another debt with a sweet office chair. HR asks manager where he got a sweet office chair. Manager claimed the chair was his for years and lied to HR. HR has fired employee identify his chair as that of the manager's chair for years. Manager is fired from a higher than 6-figure job because he lied about a dang chair. That must have been one dang fine chair. I worked at a large bank as teller through school. The branch was in a not so great side of town and had large bulletproof glass separating the tellers from the customers. A man came up to my co-worker's window and slid a note through the tray saying he had a gun and demanded the money in his drawer. My friend looked at the note, laughed, threw it in the trash and continued counting processing a transaction for the drive-thru. The man was so confused. He stood there another 20-30 seconds and left. I didn't know any of this was taking place. After he left, I asked my co-worker what that guy wanted. Oh, he just tried to rob us. It turned into a crap show at the branch. This is not the policy of handling a robbery. A full investigation was done and my co-worker was fired. I was hiring a new employee a few years ago. It had been a couple years since we hired anyone, so I went through and updated our employee manual. After I did that, I left a few copies for our other employees in case anyone was interested. One of the things that was put in the employee manual was a 3 strikes you're out policy. Do something wrong the first time and it's a verbal warning. Second time you're written up and sent home for the day. Third time you're fired. One of our guys in shipping and another guy in the office just don't get along. There's been bad blood between them for years. The guy from shipping walks into the office and up to the guy he doesn't like and with a close fist punches him right in the side of the face. Turns around and walks back out to the shipping department and keeps working like nothing happened. After I figure out what the heck happened, the cops come and cite him and I tell him to grab his stuff and that he's fired. He looks at me all confused. He goes on to explain he can't be fired. It's his first offense. He apparently read the new employee manual and thought no matter what he did, first offense was a verbal warning. In his mind, he had one more free punch to give and would still have his job. He'll allow it, but be warned the other guy still has his 2 freebies. I was an assistant manager at an adult theater store. I mean, right away that should tell you that some of your employees are going to be a little odd. It's not a field that attracts the generation's best and brightest. I would open the store in the mornings. I mean, we never closed, but we still called it the store opening. Around 8 in the morning things are slow, so it's when money issues, inventory, etc. was taken care of. I started to be concerned over opened packages. The product hanging in back of the row would often be found to be open. At first you pass it off as a damaged package, but there seemed to be a pattern. Every model of dong sleeve, inflatable doll or rubber bag had at least one opened package. Every single one. Checking the tape, I found the culprit. Dave, not his real name, worked nights and every night on his shift he would take one of those products into the bathroom, do his thing, and then reseal the box with glue or tape. I don't know how many products we sold pre-used, but if you bought a rubber product modeled off the genitals of an adult actress and thought it seemed oddly sticky inside, I can only offer you a heartfelt apology. After he was fired we found out he had also been shaking down the working customers for sexual favors in exchange for not being bothered in the theater section with their clients. I worked in a bank, not my employee, but colleague. We got robbed, armed robbery. The guy was getting away, and this colleague of mine ran out, tackled him, beat the crap out of him, made a citizen's arrest, and retrieved all of the stolen funds. He was fired for not following protocol. Oilfield trash story here. I wasn't the boss though. I was in our break room and one guy was standing up in the middle of the room. We will call this guy Joe. Another guy, let's call him Frank, was sitting down and watching the TV. Frank got irritated and told Joe to move out of the way. Joe ignored Frank and honestly acted as though he didn't even hear him. Frank then said, "Joe, get the frick out of the way." Joe turned around and said, "Suck my dong." Frank looked at him and said, "Don't make threats, butthole. Whip it out." Joe unzipped his coveralls all the way down, walked over to Frank and put his junk right in his face. Frank jumped up and tackled Joe. Then he started choking Joe. Not his exposed junk either, his actual neck. None of the onlookers, myself included, wanted to break them up and risk having old sweaty man meat touch them, so we watched and laughed. Eventually, Joe broke free and went straight to the boss. He was still half naked. Both guys got a week suspension and never spoke of the fight again. Happened to my father, but my dad, now in his 70s, started work in the late 50s early 60s. Like a lot of boys in post-war Britain, he was taken on as an apprentice, in his case as an electrician at a local engineering factory. A lot of the skilled men they had seen service during World War II. One of my father's mentors had been captured during the siege of Singapore and had spent several years as a POW under the Japanese. Sometime during his apprenticeship, my father remembers a group of Japanese engineers and managers visiting the factory, probably to discuss the purchase of one or another of their products. On their tour of the factory, the chap I mentioned above calmly walked up to this group of Japanese, picked one up by his lapels and tried to beat the crap out of him whilst screaming his old army rank and serial number at him. He was dragged off by a bunch of his mates and fired on the spot. Obviously a case of PTSD. The chap had spent several years being abused and tortured by the Japanese and had been demobbed in a terrible state. I had a professor in college who had been a Japanese POW for the entire US involvement in the war, Pearl Harbor to Nagasaki. Years later he had a Japanese exchange student and he spoke of her so highly. He said that he had hated Japanese people after his ordeal, and that she helped him start to overcome that. I used to run a convenience store years ago. It was part of a chain and all of the security cameras were available for corporate to access online so they could check on the stores from anywhere. Anyway, HR calls me one day and tells me that they caught my graveyard shift guy jerking off in the store. Not like in the office or somewhere hidden from view. Nope. Just out there in the middle of the store at 3 AM when no one was around. I mean, people could have walked by or walked in and seen him pulling his pud. Who knows how many times he did that before someone in corporate caught it. Anyway, so we had to call him into the main office to fire him, of course, and that crap was totally awkward. We didn't really have a conversation so much as we just had him read and sign a document that described in detail what he was being fired for. I still see that guy around occasionally and it's weird. And now that I think about it, I remember that at least one other guy got fired at another store for the exact same thing. Not one of my employees, but one of the new partners, was involved in a video web meeting with the upper management of the IT company I was working for, mostly to introduce him to the company. First meeting. First item on the agenda. Dressed in a suit and tie. He came on the screen, said his hellos, then settled back, and muted his phone. Apparently he thought this also killed his webcam. As the meeting continued, he scooted back and everyone could see that he was naked from the waist down as he proceeded to whip it out and fap in front of the entire management team. He must have had some pull, no pun intended, with the owner because he wasn't fired, but from then on we in IT referred to him as P. Holio. I wasn't a boss, but a coworker. I used to work at the US Patent Office as a patent examiner. One of my fellow patent examiners was from Africa and was running an illegal arranged marriage for green card business out of his office. He was eventually caught, fired, and arrested. Wasn't a boss, but I was the IT director, web development company that had hired a large number of recent college grads as developers. I was going through our file server to see why it was filling up so quickly and came across the home drive of one of our devs and it was chock full of a few gig of PVids. But no, not just any PVids, his own, self-made, PVids of him and various women. Seriously, who has balls that big that they not only store P on the corporate network, but PO themselves? Saw two co-workers receiving oral in our stockroom security footage. They've worked there for over a year. They knew there was cameras there. They wanted to be seen. Not one of my employees, but I am the one that initiated his removal. Several years ago I was in charge of a data center. Typical 24/7 operation. I got an automated alert from a server late one evening and decided to drive to the office. I asked the server farm admin to meet me there. The corporate help desk, also a 24/7 operation, was situated right outside the data center. This fateful night, just one person was working there. The data center and help desk were effectively in the middle of the building, so there is no way for anyone sitting there to know that someone was in the office. I walked around the corner to find the lone help desk person sitting in front of his monitor with his pants around his ankles. He obviously didn't hear me walking down the hall, so let's just say he was in the middle of the task at hand. Out of sheer reflex I rather loudly said, "Dude, what the frick?" An awkward scramble to simultaneously turn off his monitor and pull up his pants ensued. I said that I was going to go into the data center to address a server issue, and he had better get himself sorted out before I return. As I step into the data center, I called the guy who is in charge of the help desk. I had to explain to him what just happened, and suggested that he may want to have a conversation with his support rep. As I finish up the call, the server farm admin enters the data center. He looks at me somewhat puzzled and asked why no one was sitting at the help desk. Apparently the support rep knew his days were numbered and just bolted. The next day I had another conversation with the help desk manager. Obviously he fired the rep. The rep made it easy because he abandoned his job. Otherwise it could have come down to his word versus mine. The kicker was that apparently the rep was rumored to have been a phantom fapper, but no one had really caught him in the act. I was running a retail store and had a kid that decided H was a good idea before our monthly store meeting. He's sitting front and center, literally right in front of me, and has a bad case of the nods, to the point where his head finally drooped to the countertop and there he stayed. I'm getting peed, but can't stop the store meeting to address a dude with the nods. Everyone that can see him is staring at him, then me, then back to him waiting to see the next move. I was talking about hitting a goal and getting the most penetration we can. He's starting to shift positions, getting cozy in his altered state, and I flip out, slamming my hand on the counter he is resting on and loudly say, "Up employee, what's going on?" And without missing a beat he lifts his head, eyes still closed, and blurts out, "Penetration." Everyone, including me, burst out laughing. I think I sent him to the office, finished the store meeting, then had a private meeting with him and my partner at the store. We couldn't send him home because liable. So we had to call his family, who he'd been living with when his parents sent him to another state because the same crap happened where he was living. He agreed he should resign his position. He went to rehab again shortly after, but I don't think he's managed to stay clean. Came in a while later trying to pawn some stuff and had to sit on the floor because junk. Hope you're doing well, JS. I manage an IT department for government office. Get a call that a user's laptop hard drive won't let him save files anymore. My first thought is hardware failure or virus malware. I sit down at the user's desk and there's a folder right on the desktop that says AM BBC. Shouldn't be there, so I open it. Gigs of amateur white women fricking black men. I turn to look at the guy as he's standing behind me, and with a straight face and unprompted he says, "I love them white women." He was gone the next day. They don't think it be like it is, but it do. I guess not the craziest, but one of my middle-aged employees constantly repeated the same joke. As awkward as it was, I couldn't fire him for it. I work for a gas company and we have to dig in people's yards. Every single time a person would ask us what we're doing, this guy would respond with, "We're here to wreck your yard," but he would say it with an old school Dracula voice. So it would sound like this: "We're here to wreck Veva." The customer would just look at him confused and I had to jump in and explain properly. He did this every single time. I told him to stop repeatedly, but he honestly thought it was hilarious. We had a mad crapper at this party equipment rental company. Random people would find human turds in their items, inside cassette tapes, cases, radios, hard hats, pockets of jackets. The guy was remarkably accurate. Here's the Night Shyamalan twist. It was the boss. He'd poo in your items when he was mad at you. I wasn't the boss, but I helped my boss get a co-worker fired. I was working in a record store at the time. Had this slacker kid that was all sorts of cocky for a co-worker, always bragging about something. but he did his job, so we dealt with it. Now, before I go further, know this. Record stores have a crap ton of regulars. More than any other job I've ever had. You get to know your customers. We had a young woman come in all the time that was slightly special. She was good enough go out on her own on the bus and be on her own for hours. Super sweet. Loved pop music. Each Tuesday, she'd come in and buy whichever new one came out. We started to put one aside for her each week. Then, we didn't see her for a month or so. I wanna say NSYNC had a new album come out, or someone like that. I saw her come back in, no smile, no cheeriness. She snuck in and came over to me and asked for the CD. I asked her what's up and where she had been and if she was okay. She turned red and told me that it was embarrassing. I, not wanting to pry, told her about her stack of pop CDs and told her sorry she's sad. She asked about the slacker. To make sure he wasn't here today. What did he do? Is the first thing I said. I knew he did something. In that moment, she wrote it down because she didn't want to say it out loud. Paraphrasing, it's been a long time. Hey, after work, we could meet up and if you suck my dong, I'll eat your puss, is what he told her. I asked her to wait there. I went and got the bossman. He came out and apologized profusely for what happened and bought her CDs personally. Corporate was called. They flew in, or drove in, IDR. This was 10 years ago, minimum. The next day when he came in, they took him in the office and flipped their crap on him. He was escorted out and they told us they'd handle things. We never heard any more about it, but our customer was never sad again. I was once a supervisor in a call center. I came out of the bathroom, turned the corner, and saw a phone agent sitting there in his cubicle. He had taken the laces out of one of his shoes and had lit it on fire. He was just sitting there watching it. I said, this might sound like a joke, considering what's going on here, but you're fired. He laughed. I said, I'm serious. Get out. He went to HR to complain about me. When he told them what had happened, they escorted him out of the building. That is how incredibly boring call centers are. I worked as a chief for IT repair and maintenance biz. We had few people, so I had to leave the shop for a customer visit. I jokingly told a new guy in training try not to burn down the shop while I'm not here, so I come back about 45 minutes later and found there's smoke coming out of the shop. I freak out. There's no one to be found. I grabbed the fire extinguisher and go in. I find there's a connected on soldering iron placed on the seat of the new guy's workstation. Luckily there's no fire, but the soldering iron has melted and burnt most of the seat, hence the smoke. I unplugged it and take the seat outside and blast it with the fire extinguisher. Then the guy returns with a no worries face and said smilingly sorry, I went out for a smoke. He didn't pass the training is all I can say. We hired some temp staff to help us over Christmas in the shop and asked one of them to stand at the front of the store to greet customers, see if they'd like a personal shopper or any other help. A few hours later I went to check on how they were doing and couldn't find her. I looked around but gave up and went to walk back. As I turned to head back to my desk I see that our giant Christmas tree is looking a little disheveled, so I go and tidy it up. Once I am close to the tree I can see the temp hidden inside it, looking terrified. She had suffered a panic attack pretty soon after she started and climbed into the tree to hide. I struggle with anxiety myself. It was working at the store that had helped to sort me out a bit, so I didn't report it to anyone higher up than me. I just took her back to the office to calm down and drink tea, got someone else to do the greeting and popped her on the checkouts. That didn't stop the story spreading amongst every member of staff in a matter of minutes. Wasn't the boss, but about 6 years ago the company I was at hired a new senior support techie. We had an open plan office with cluster desks with no divisions between them as we spent very little time in the office, so no one was bothered. One morning I was catching up on some admin and the boss walks in, looks at me and says what the frick. Now I'm thinking what the heck? Why is he swearing at me? He rushes past me and turns off the monitor on the PC behind me. The new techie had copied his P collection to the My Pictures folder and the screensaver was set to cycle through all the pictures. He was fired about 5 minutes later. You've been visited by the good sleep capybara. Upvote within the next 5 seconds and you will be blessed with cozy and restful sleeps. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, Have a great day, you magnificent people.